Dennis want to take a plate? Or a plate to put your plate on. So it isn't full. Yeah. Andrew Reed stage, sorry, do you want me? It's just a lot. Did he tell you that away? Babies.
It's a good question.
Yes. I think it's just fine, really colourful things. The colourful is. Because it's just blue umbrella. Oh, the one colour. I think it's by colourful. Yeah, we went with it.
No, so basic science from that kind of work. So I mean,
Actually, I think this is the last of my favorites.
yeah, I would.
It's formal, my formal minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you like that? Like I can't, until I have a block of meetings and they're done, I can't. Yeah.
You're based on the book. Well,
So that's why I throw it in her desk. Let's go back. We have it.
Have you been doing that for a while or? I started.
And then when we ready.
Alright,
Yeah.
should I begin?
You can eat crust.
Should I begin? How many have we got on?
Oh.
Oh,
One of those you.
pardon, one of them's me.
Hello to Amber, Janet, and Vanessa.
Hi, Amber, Janet, and Vanessa Murphy. I will just begin while everyone's getting their lunch to acknowledge, of course, our traditional landowners, the Awabakal people, or the Pendulum clan of the Awabakal people here at HMRI, and show our deep, well, pay my deep respects to our traditional First Nations people, elders past, present, and emerging. I'm Vanessa McDonald, and nice to meet everyone. I should stop being silly. This is being recorded. All right, so I have been asked to talk about grants and contemporary advice on what makes a grant stand out from a crowd. And it's interesting that my Learn at Lunch fell on this week, having just submitted my investigator grant and having others have like submitting their investigator grant too. Perhaps I should have done this a couple of months ago, which I think I was scheduled for, but had to be rescheduled. So really, I have a disclaimer in that I've had more grants be unsuccessful than I've had successful grants. And I think probably everyone that writes grants could say that as well. But I have submitted a lot and I've also reviewed a lot. So I've sat on NHMRC grant review panels, MRFF grant review panels, as well as grant review panels. But here at HMRI, you will know UON rather, New England Health, and other international societies, TSAZ, etc. So I've seen a lot of grants. So really, I'm just kind of here to share with you my experience in terms of what I think works well, what I've seen in terms of successful grants, what I've seen in terms of the ones that I think I wish I wrote this grant. This is so cool. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. Here are my other disclosures, none of which are relevant, except some of these people have funded my grants. So I guess the first question is, what's essential when we're putting a grant together? what are the main ingredients? What do you need before you can even start to think, gosh, I'm going to write a grant and submit it?
An idea.
Just like it. So I think there's a couple of things. You need certainly an idea. That's the first thing you need. That's what the question mark signifies. But then you also need a couple of other things to go along with a grant submission. And I think you need pilot data. Now, this talk has evolved over the years. I think you can actually probably submit MRFF grants and be successful without pilot data these days. I don't think you can do that very much. So the different schemes have slightly different requirements, but pilot data, I would say, is pretty key. You need a team, so you need to be able to build a group of people that have the expertise in the area that your grant relates to, who can work together and show feasibility so that that team has the skills and expertise to do the work. And of course, the track record. So what else works? And these are things, some of it's repetitive. So a novel hypothesis or a research question. So that's your first thing. You don't kind of, do anything until you've got that. Pilot data to support that hypothesis. If you are wanting to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to go and do an RCT on phenotype-based management in asthma and COPD, then you're not going to get funding unless you can show some pilot data that says you have the expertise, the skills, the potential design will work and everything. Now, just as an aside, that's what I did when I did my PhD. I woke up and said, I want to do a phenotype-based RCT. And I was told no. And you need the publications and the track record to convince the grant reviewer that you can do this. While writing your grant critical review is particularly important. And getting it from someone who maybe is not in your area of expertise is what I would recommend, because that's who's going to review your grant. So you're going to get insights that you might not get from an expert in the field, and they might be able to identify limitations. And I think an example of this, and I'm sure Peter won't mind if I say, is that when he did his investigator grant, I looked at his first page, and as an expert in that field, I thought it was fantastic. When Tim Hayden looked at it, he said, oh, you need to rewrite your first page. So it kind of really helps to get that critical review so that you can ensure that reviewer that's reading it, that's not in your field of expertise, is going to just want this grant to be funded. Because that's what you've got to do when you do this. You have to be able to get the reviewers to think this grant has to win, so they'll fight for your grant. And then, of course, you need to apply, when you're applying for NHMRC or MRFF grants, apply those descriptors harshly. But when I'm writing a grant, I print the descriptors. I also kind of go through my Word document and put little comments that have the descriptors that I want to kind of meet alongside the different aspects of the grant. So as I'm writing, I'm using the words that are in the descriptors and applying it to my grant. And when I'm reviewing and writing my peer reviews, I also sit with that thing and I write a good publication record. They know that they've got a 4 from me. Outstanding publication record. They know that they've got a 6 from me. So that's how I also write the grant as well as review them. And now, of course, with NHMRC, particularly with ideas grants and investigator grants, we need to demonstrate verifiable impact. And you need, I mean, having just written an investigator grant, you can't just say, and having sat on an investigator grant panel this year, you can't just say, and many people did, particularly level 3s, I'm amazing and I've published all these papers in the New England Journal, because that's research, that's not impact. So what did those publications do for knowledge, for health, for the economy? That's where you've got to kind of convince the reviewer of the story of impact. So, in terms of the basics, look at the category descriptors, read the objectives, try and even craft the objectives into your grant. And I just looked at a grant we submitted to MRFF the other day when I was working on my investigator grant, that very clearly said this grant will do this, 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 and this, meeting the objectives of this scheme. So you have to help the reviewer and convince the reviewer that this is how it works. Read all the funding policies, guidelines, and instructions. And I mean, this is basic kind of advice. But there were a couple of MRFF grants last year where we went back and forth multiple times with the uni trying to understand what these guidelines meant, because they were really ambiguous. And, you know, if we hadn't done that, we may not have submitted the grant. So, I mean, those are the things that are really important. Now, get the critical information and maybe do what works for you, pin it to the wall. You know, have your deadlines on your little monthly calendars on your desk or however you work so that so things are not getting backed up. I have, like, as you know, like a little bullet journal with all my list of things to do, and I have a page for each grant I'm working on, and hopefully they're at different times of the year. And I'll have a list of things, which includes things like minimum data and the date, and then a little tick box when I've done it. Team, collaboration, statements, like track record statements, compliance and eligibility. And then when it's for grants like impact, project description, my track record, etc. So I break it down to little bits. Cover letter, so that I'm making sure I'm on time for all of these things that need to happen, and that I'm not forgetting this. That can happen. Refer back to this, and when I'm working, I'm kind of going, I should get a little photo and put it in my slide of what it looks like. But I go back to that all the time. The other thing that I've mentioned that I do is use the language of the guidelines and of the category descriptors in writing the grant. Asthma is an area of utmost importance to human health, because when you look at the NHMRC guidelines, they'll say this is an area of utmost importance to human health. So just help them. Here's an example of the category descriptors. When I write a grant, I only look at 7, because I want to try and make the grant as close to the 7 as possible. So when I review grants, I look at all of them. But when I write them, I write for a 7. And I'm sure I can't meet 7s in every single aspect, and maybe not even at all. But if you can aim for doing that to make sure that you can kind of focus on the things you're going to need to score highly, then that's going to help with your grant. The other thing I want to talk about, this is not just for NHMRC or MRFF, is who is your audience? So last year, there was an MRFF call for treatable traits in respiratory disease. And then there was an MRFF call for clinician researchers and a special category for nurses and midwives. So I wrote the grant for the MRFF respiratory treatable traits. And then about a month later, the clinician grant was due. So then I rewrote the grant in terms of the background so that it kind of fulfilled the needs of a nursing and midwifery review. The grant design didn't necessarily change too much, but the way I presented it certainly did. For one grant, it was like a respiratory audience that I wrote it for. The next one, it was a nursing audience or midwifery audience. And both of those grants were successful. So I couldn't accept both, however. So I had to give one up. So I gave up the one that was less valued. But that's what I mean about thinking about who your audience is. And this is something I think, because I'm a nurse, as you know, and I think when nurses write grants, they often struggle with this because they continue to write for their discipline rather than writing for the discipline that's reviewing. So whether you're writing for, NHMRC, MRFF, or whether it's like a HCF grant or something like that, just make sure you know who the audience is and what they like about it. Now, the first page, I think, can make or break a grant. And I'm sure everybody's heard that before. I think with the first page, it's your chance to capture the room. When you're reviewing these grants, it can happen at any time of day. So it might be at 1 o'clock in the morning, it might be 5 o'clock in the morning, or it might be, at your desk at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Usually for me, when I first started sitting on MRC panels, it was at 1 a.m. I'd still be going at them. But now I've got older and I can't stay up that late. So it's at 5 a.m. But these are not times that, are within your work hours for most people, I would say. So you want the reviewer to kind of really be in love with what they're reading. And that's why you want to grab them with that first page. So it needs to be clear and succinct. And it needs to kind of tell them the story. And I'm going to talk to you about telling the story in a minute. They're just some other examples of front pages. Now, I think this one is good because it's got like this block. It's got lots of white space. It's got room for you to kind of step out your hypotheses and your aims and things like that. This one doesn't have as much white space as I would like it to, but still make sure there's an image and different kind of formatting in order to bring the reviewer in. Unfortunately, this is the grant I submitted yesterday. Now, I just want to talk to you about developing dramatic tension. So I really like this little analogy, and I saw this once presented by Shannon Simpson at Telethon Kids. So this is Freytag's pyramid. Has anyone heard of that? You were at Shannon's talk. Gustav Freytag is a German author and playwright. And he thinks that there's 5 really critical elements to writing a story, to writing a play, writing a novel, and getting the story and capturing the audience and getting them really into it. And this starts with the exposition. There's then this rising action until you get to the climax. Once you hit the climax, in a play or a novel, there's falling action and then resolution. So that's the way he kind of describes the storytelling plays and novels. And I think grants are similar. So if we have to think about this and apply it to Freytag's pyramid, we have our current situation, where we're at now. We then start to build the conflict. What is it? What's the conflict? What's the problem? We're building this up. And you can see how you do this when you're writing a grant. You're building it up. And then you hit this climax after like really telling your story, saying this, this is terrible, this has to happen, and patients deserve this. Like that's what the grant is, it's a story. And then at the climax, that's your solution. So you can say, this is what we're doing now, it's terrible, it's not working, we really need a new approach. These mandate that we have to take action. And then this is the solution. And this is how I'm going to do it. And when I do it, this is the call to action, or this is the call to action for this grant. This grant has to be funded in order to achieve this solution by doing this research. So I've applied this kind of to our successful CRE grant from a couple of years ago. And I did this retrospectively. So after hearing Shannon talk about this, I went back and thought, that's really interesting. And I looked at the CRE front page, and here we have the current situation. So, obviously, didn't move. Why are you not seeing what I'm seeing? Okay. So this is the front page of the CRE grant. So here's the current situation. Well, we really achieved great things in the 20th century, but now this is lost. People are dying every day from asthma. The global burden's huge. These data are extremely alarming because asthma is a treatable disease. This is the problem. This is where we're at the moment. So then we need this, and describing the current situation, the problem, what our new approach is. We need a new approach to managing asthma. And we've developed precision measures and strategy called treatable traits. We've kind of hit the solution here, and this is how we're going to do it in terms of what we'll do as part of this CRE. So our call to action is that we will develop new knowledge. We will implement and develop tools. We'll train the next generation. We'll develop collaboration. Now, anyone that knows the CRE guidelines knows that they're the objectives as part of the CRE, and they're bolded and they're there. And so I thought, yeah, that really fits well into like a grant application. So I think it's a really nice concept to think about when you're writing. Now, I said earlier, I think what you want to do with your grant is you want the reviewer sitting there saying, oh, this is so good, I wish I had read this grant. And I've had grants like that which I've scored sevens. And I may have said to people, this document's amazing and covers everything, hits the criteria and things like that. So that's what you're aiming to do when you're kind of trying to stand out from the crowd of, for example, when I did investigator grants this year, I had 21, and they're all not going to get funded. They're all good. They're all great. They're all even, some are outstanding, but really we're looking at the exceptional here. And Vanessa keeps telling me when I'm kind of, giving myself a bit of a moat, that 95% of people are also excellent and still didn't get it. So I think, that's why the 7 is so important. All right, so what you want to be able to fill your grant with white space, with figures, have an aesthetically pleasant looking grant. And you may have noticed by the examples that I've put on the screen so far that all of my grants are themed. So when every kind of image or figure has a colour theme to it, so there's a synergy through the grant. The titles kind of you know, match the colours of the grant, things like that, the chart, the, what do you call the headers and things like that. Everything's always consistent because that's easy on the eye and it's pleasing and it's, you know, makes it nicer for the reviewer to do. Sometimes figures are challenging because they give you 5 pages for an investigator grant. So it's a bit, you know, I think it's worthwhile assisting trying to get those in. Now you want to make sure that the figure size, of course, is readable as well. And this is interesting because another sign of aging, in that I would put figures in grants and I'd get peer review often by the deputy say, I can't read your figures. And now I review other people's grants and I'm like, I can't read this. So now I can sympathise.
On that, do you think most people still will read it on the screen, or like do some people will like they print out the?
I print them. I
Okay.
have trouble reconciling that with the environment, but I also find it very difficult to score grades on the screen because I write all over them and, you know, and then kind of circle things, highlight things, put my little comments in, and then I come back and write the report.
Yeah.
So for me, it's much easier to do it on paper.
So we should try and print it and see if you can read it.
Yeah. Bring me your grants if I can read it. See if it's okay. Now, I say this with writing papers as well, but make sure it's easy to read. Avoid the jargon, avoid abbreviations. Okay? I hate abbreviations. And this is really important because of something I said in the beginning. You're not going to have an expert review, or chances are you're not going to have an expert review your grant because they're going to, you know, maybe be conflicted or some other reason. They're not in your field. If you look at the investigator grants, I don't think I had a single respiratory grant to review. So they were all in cardiovascular disease and kidney disease and all these other diseases, which are not my area of expertise. So you're actually looking at, you know, them selling the importance of why this work needs to be done, but then being able to nail the methods and being able to convince you that this area of research is so much better than everywhere else. And that's why you avoid jargon and abbreviations. Sometimes I remember, like, when I was doing the investigator grants, I'd get to a point, there'd be this acronym and I'd think, God, what's that? I can't remember what that is. Like, so, you know, you have to search and find and go back and things like that, which again is, you know, a little bit annoying, I guess, from that reviewer's perspective. And then systematically do things. So be organised, have a systematised approach to how you present it. And what I recommend for people doing clinical research here is if you're proposing an RCT, go to the Spirit guidelines, go to the consult chart and write your grant according to that. If you're doing an observational study, look at the stroke checklist and write your grant in that order. Qualitative study, go to the core and write it in that order. So it's organised, logical, systematic, and you know you haven't forgotten critical errors, fatal flaws. So there's just another couple of examples, I think. A front page and what different grants might look like with figures and fonts and things like that. Neither of those grants were successful. Oh, they're the same grant. Okay. So when you've done all that, you then have to make it shine. So how do you do that? I don't submit grants even if they're ready the night before. I don't submit them. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I read it when I'm at my freshest. And I did that yesterday and I was still making some changes because I thought, oh, I didn't see that, or oh gosh, that's missing. So when you've been writing a grant and you're at the end of the day and you've been pushing the deadline and trying to get everything all together, and then you hit submit at kind of 6 o'clock, you're fatigued and you may have missed things and stuff like that. So I mean, this depends, I suppose. Like, I clearly work, I'm more functional nowadays in the morning than I used to be. So that's why I do it like that, so that I can make sure my grant is as polished as it possibly can. The better option or advice for you is have it ready earlier than the deadline. But we know that doesn't happen. Make sure your ideas are clear and concise, and giving it to someone else to do is very useful for that. And like I said to Hayley yesterday, I think, or the day before, can you block a couple of hours in the day to proofread my grant? And my time on it didn't work for me in that I didn't have it ready in enough time for her to do. But if you can, then someone else can say, it's not that familiar with that current grant. I don't get this. What do you mean? Nothing, people might know when I review their work, this isn't clear to me. So they're the things that you kind of got to polish as well. I am such a believer of reading things out loud, because when you sit and you proofread on the screen or on the paper, you read what you think you wrote. And you can still do that if you read it out loud, but if you read it out loud, you've got more of a chance of hearing what you've written rather than just not seeing what you've written. I think and it also helps with punctuation and things like that. Now with grants, I'm always amazed at people that say, I saw this call, it's due next week, I'm going to submit something. Because grants take time. They take a draft, a rewrite, and it often happens several times, as people that have submitted big grants will know. So, so bear that in mind when you're thinking about it. And that point I said earlier about making sure your figures are big enough to read. All right, so in terms of questions, I guess, this is the meat of it. What's the big question? What are your research questions, your aims, your hypotheses? State them clearly and precisely. Describe your intervention, describe your outcome measures. And does your study completely and unambiguously answer the question? And if it doesn't, what are you left with? So kind of think about that when you're writing your grant as well. And this is where sub-studies might help your grant. So, you might do an RCT that's negative, and they've just funded it with $2 million. Now it's a negative study. You want to be able to generate new knowledge, understanding something doesn't work is new knowledge, I should say. So negative studies are important. But you also wanted to be able to look at, okay, what else can we do with these data? And Amazes is a great example of that, where they did a definitive RCT to look at the impact of macrolides in people with severe or moderate asthma. But that RCT also probably has 20 other papers that look at sub-studies. So that's kind of what you want. You can't put those 20 questions in your grant, obviously, but you want to be able to kind of look at, well, what are some mechanistic studies that I can include in here so that we're also generating this other new knowledge. Or what are the, process evaluation type things that we learn from the approach that we did in terms of implementation to practice. So, this didn't work and patients tell us this is, what we need to do next. Common problems. Okay, people can go on and on. And then they give you what you need for their methods. So there'll be inefficient detail. They won't be convincing that they know how to actually do the techniques. The techniques might not be state of the art. And it's over jargon. An expert reviewer should see you as an expert in that technique. So, for example, Dennis's digital team grant, we wanted to develop a digital platform. We had all these ideas. Dennis had RCT experience in digital technologies, but not in the development. So off we went and got someone who worked at CSIRO, who was a developer. So yeah, if you don't have the expertise, all of the aspects of the work that you're presenting, get someone in your team that does. All right, so then, we want to have the analysis. This is so important, right? Because on the panels, you've got clinicians, you've got researchers, you've got epidemiologists and statisticians. And the power of the statistician on those panels is enormous. So the grant will be great, and they said, oh yeah, they're not powered for their secondary outcomes. or this analysis is just not going to work. And then suddenly the rest of the room goes, maybe it's fine. So there, you've got to get those things right. And, involving a statistician in your grant development and application will allow you to kind of make sure you address that. And then tell them, remember that thing about if you're not an expert, get it. So if I'm going to do, this novel statistical analysis, but I've got no idea how to do it, and I don't have a statistician on my team. Oh yes, they must be all right at what they do, but I don't see a statistician here. So that's really important. Is it feasible? Oh, they're from Newcastle. They're proposing 3,000 patients. They're not going to be able to do that. So make sure you justify that recruitment is feasible. Dennis has got some lovely grants that he does that really nicely with. Make sure, we're going to do functional MRI on these people. They don't even have an MRI machine. Okay. And a big one. Newcastle doesn't even have a clinical trials unit. How are they going to do a clinical trial? So, these are the things you actually might not want to put in your grant. You might feel like they're wasting your space, but in order to convince the reviewer that I'm looking for flaws, all these grants are great. So how do you define of the 20 you've got which 2 are going to get funded or which 1 is going to get funded? You have to look for flaws. And that's what people do. So then you've got to be able to convince them. HMRI, state-of-the-art facilities, a MRI machine on campus, access to it costs X number of dollars or whatever, which is built into the budget. So those kind of stories. I will work with the HMRI clinical trials unit. We've got the other, what are they called? Like the histology, what are those platforms called?
Calls, histology call.
They're called core services platforms. Yeah. So, you know, HMRI have histology as a core platform, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, where you're getting it and let them know that. Particularly if it's a little bit left field of what you're doing. A team lacking expertise, lacking time. And I think the other thing I would say about that there, I think now, it's probably from the original writing of this slide, sometimes lacking expertise might not necessarily be a bad thing when the grant wants you to support ECRs. And expertise is not the word there, it might be track record. So ECR may not have, you know, a 7 track record, but you want to be able to support ECRs in a lot of the schemes, and in fact most of the schemes these days. So you want to be able to demonstrate that as well. You want to show them a feasible timeline, and often people's timelines are not feasible. So that can be an area to say, oh, seriously, they're going to recruit 3,000 people in 2 years? And then other in terms of the actual, the question and how it's designed, is the effect size plausibly large? And people will do that in order to, you know, make their sample size feasible. Yes. That's going to kind of, you know, you're going to weigh it up and you're going to kind of, you know, think, I've got to do something that's plausible and feasible. Is my assessment of adherence overly optimistic? 50% of people don't use their inhalers, but I'm going to just give them an inhaler until they go. Or in palliative care, you know, X number of people will die before the end of this study. I haven't factored that into my sample size, etc. So that kind of fits into that incomplete, what the completeness to follow up. And there are ways of dealing with that in palliative care. And of course, you know, if it's a clinical trial, you don't have the expertise, you have to kind of sort the expertise. It's very obvious within the grant. So in your grant structure, you want to have headlines, little sound bites, highlight the grant's strengths, summarise the complexity so that it's easy to read and understand. This is your one chance to self-promote grant applications and use hyperbole appropriately. It's okay to do that in grant applications. And, you know, as I said, you can't use that when you're writing a paper or whatever. So I've just got an example of what might be appropriate hyperbole. So we've developed a precision medicine strategy called treatable traits. Our team leads the world in this new approach. We're amazing. We've defined the core components. We've conducted the first RCT. We've demonstrated efficacy. We are this and we're that. Our team is not only the treatable traits world leaders, but together we've driven the ICS stewardship agenda. We've recently done this. Okay, these are the things you've got to do. These are the things that will convince the reviewer that you're the person for the job.
Does it ever give you like the ick if you're reading someone's that's like that, but then you look at their track record or something and it's like,
oh yeah, it's got to, you know, there's got to be a disconnect.
so you don't like oversell.
You got to have the goods. Yeah. So, you know, your story might be very different. So, for example, you and I are writing the grant. You haven't yet got a track record in treatable traits. So, you know, CI, whatever, so CI McDonald is a world leader in treatable traits. CI lose weight brings, you know, expertise or exceptional expertise in the management or the development of measures for breathlessness. So, you know, that's all true. We're just got to kind of build up those members of the team in order to kind of, you know, demonstrate a role for people as well. So that's another thing that I haven't said that's also important. If you look at a list of the investigators, what's their role? You know, they're retired and sure they got 500 papers, but you know, what are they doing here? So yeah, that's important. Pilot data, what time is it? Pilot data, why it's so important. So we need to, as I said, I think I've mentioned these things, convince the committee that you can do the work, that you have expertise in the measurements, that you can recruit, that you can administer the intervention. It's particularly important for behavioural studies. Now we're going to do this complex behavioural intervention, but you've never done anything like that before. You know, that you're going to get that reviewer that's kind of going to knock you out of the field. And, you know, because of the impact that goes into writing an exceptional grant, you need to convince yourself it's worth the effort because it can be pretty hard work. And, you know, if you're thinking about it, 6 months is probably a good timeline to actually kind of think. You don't 2 weeks before say, okay, I think I'll throw one in. And I'm not going to say we've never done that. Shrines comes to mind. But that they're kind of exceptional circumstances. More stuff on, you know, knowing what the treatment efficacy and safety is, where you're going to recruit from, whether you're going to be successful there, and you know what's the adherence of participants going to be to the intervention, and how do you deal with contamination from new or other studies or just from clinical practice. We're dealing with that at the moment in TTOX. I've mentioned time. But, you know, if you think about it, people don't generally have overnight success with an MRC or MOF. And you have to kind of think about these things. How long does it take to collect the pilot data from the study? How long does it take for me to get the relevant expertise and to be able to write the grant? And overall, what other things are distracting you? I think that's a really important question to ask yourself. You know, if you've got massive kind of things going on outside of your work, or a massive workload where you're not going to be able to invest the time, is it the right time to do it? Or should you kind of put a bit more planning into it? I wanted to say something quickly around consumer involvement, because certainly for the MRFF schemes, you cannot put a grant in here without annexing this effectively. It's an essential component of the criteria as well as the guidelines for voting your grant. So make sure that you consider this and that you have authentic consumer involvement. On the MRFF panels, there's a consumer that sits on the panel, and the consumer has the power of the statistician. They took me through your grant, and they will sit there and, you know, you'll say something in your grant like, I'm going to develop a consumer reference group. The consumer, well, why are they going to do it? Why haven't they done it already? Why haven't they kind of engaged consumers in the development and the design of the application that speaks to them? Where are the consumers? Is there AIs or their, you know, CIs and have they ever worked with consumers? And these are going to be important, particularly for MRF and increasingly so in NH and MRC. So make sure you think about that and kind of look at ways you can do that. We have a lot of experience in consumer involvement in research, so if anyone kind of wants some help with that, please just come talk to Vanessa. Hi. So I just wanted to give an example here. This is actually part of the guidelines for, I can't remember what the scheme was here, but the research meets the needs of researchers, end users, consumers, or community members. So the grant were being scored on this. So, and here's some examples. So we have involved end users in defining our research questions. So these are end users, these are not the patient consumers. So how do we do that? We held a roundtable discussion with clinicians from around Australia, as well as representative peak bodies, to determine key research questions and gaps in clinical care. I think this is the CRE. Yes. Prior to the roundtable, we also surveyed severe asthma clinicians through the GSA and NZ. Both of these things kind of identify barriers to implementation of novel severe asthma therapies. So this is, oh no, this wasn't, this was M&M. So this study will help to define the place of macrolides in severe asthma. And the end users here are the clinicians. And I don't have an example of the patient. Dennis has done a Learn at Lunch on budget and has sold you on the importance of it being more justified, appropriate and correct. Because on the panel, there are people that sit and recalculate everything you've done. I don't do that. Numbers are not my thing. And I have a certain level of trust. But there are people that do that. So, yeah. And then how do you get better? And I think these are important points. Read other people's grants, read successful grants. I can't tell you how many investigator grants I've read. Not only by doing a peer review panel thing, but just kind of from asking successful people, can I see their grant? Because it gives you such insight. Next year, I want to submit a new CRE. Can you believe it? And so what I've done is I've self-nominated myself to be on a CRE panel for the next round, this round, so that I can see what the competition is at the moment, because I haven't kind of looked at CRE applications for 5 years. But I need to know how they've evolved and what's required in order to be successful. So hopefully they select. Right, apply. So most of your grants will be unsuccessful, and everyone has that experience. It doesn't matter who you are. But take Dennis's kind of tenacity and just keep on going. Read well so that you know what's kind of being done. And one of the things I did this time around was when I was selecting my 10 best publications, I went in to look at what the citations are, checked that in. Then I looked at who's citing this work, and found some pieces of gold for my grant from the people